The Bible provides a comprehensive and evolving perspective on the consumption of meat, spanning from the creation narrative to New Testament teachings. In the beginning, God established a plant-based diet for humanity, as seen in Genesis 1:29, where he gave Adam and Eve every seed-bearing plant and fruit for food. This initial design reflected a world before sin, where humans lived in harmony with nature. However, after the fall and the subsequent flood, God permitted Noah and his descendants to eat meat, as seen in Genesis 9:3. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you, and as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. This marked a shift in God's provision, yet he established a restriction regarding the consumption of blood as it symbolized life. Genesis 9:4. Later, through the law of Moses, God introduced dietary regulations to the Israelites, distinguishing between clean and unclean animals in Leviticus 11. These laws were both spiritual and practical, setting Israel apart from other nations and promoting holiness. But they may also have been protective in nature, as unclean animals were often associated with diseases or impurities. Animals like cattle, sheep, and goats were considered clean, while pigs, camels, and certain birds were labeled unclean and forbidden for consumption. These laws reflected God's covenant with Israel and their unique identity as his chosen people. In the New Testament, however, Jesus and the apostles introduced a shift in understanding dietary laws. Jesus declared in Mark 7:18-19 that what enters the body does not defile a person, but rather what comes from the heart. This teaching redefined the significance of food in relation to purity. Additionally, in Acts 10, Peter received a vision in which God told him not to call anything impure that he had made clean, signifying the end of Old Testament dietary restrictions. This vision was part of a broader message about the inclusion of Gentiles into the Christian faith, but it also indicated a new freedom regarding what believers could eat, including meat. The Apostle Paul also addresses the topic of meat consumption in his letters, particularly when discussing food that had been sacrificed to idols. In 1 Corinthians 8, Paul explains that while eating meat offered to idols is not inherently sinful, Christians should be mindful of others' consciences, especially those who may feel conflicted about eating such food. Paul emphasizes that the freedom to eat meat should not become a stumbling block to others. In Romans 14:2-3, Paul further reminds believers not to judge one another over their dietary choices, whether they choose to eat meat or abstain. The overarching principle is love and consideration for others in the community of faith. Ultimately, the Bible's view on meat is one of balance, moderation, and gratitude. 1 Timothy 4:4-5 affirms that everything God created is good and should be received with thanksgiving, as long as it is consecrated by God's word and prayer. This encourages believers to eat with a thankful heart, whether consuming meat or plant-based foods. At the same time, Proverbs 12:10 reminds us of the responsibility to care for animals, underscoring that God's creation should be treated with respect. Therefore, while Christians are free to eat meat, they are also called to do so with mindfulness of others, care for creation, and gratitude for God's provision.